we are, okay.
Big action.
Okay, because this one is quite deep.
Look और आपको जब कॉलोन তোমার শুনে আমার পেট কামড়াচ্ছে তোমার শুনে আমার পেট কামড়াচ্ছে
make sure that everyone is heard. I'm sure everyone will be heard and will be able to hear our panelists, but it just feels much nicer if people are closer. So could I request people to sort of fill up the seats here? That would be really nice. Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone. We're in a very happy situation where there are 3 speakers here with lots of time to delve into what they want to tell us about. So we get to them straight away. Each of our speakers comes from different parts of the country and outside, and will talk, make their presentations for about 20 minutes. And then we have 10 minutes per speaker. We have questions following the speaker. And then at the end of all 3 speakers, if there are some general questions or discussions and we have some time left, we could always come back to that. So if I could request Tanweer Fazal to go first as per the schedule. Tanweer is Associate Professor at the Center for the Study of Social Systems at JNU. He specializes in the sociology of nationalisms, community formation and identification with specific focus on their implications on discourses of rights and entitlements. Additionally, his research has a strong element of public policy orientation that involves rigorous analysis of existing policy instruments while suggesting new modes of interventions. Prior to joining JNU, he taught at the Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution at Jamia Millia Islamia. He's been a research consultant with the Prime Minister's high-level committee, the Sachar Committee, wherein he works specifically on status stratification with particular reference to the OVCs among the Muslims in India. Fazal is an associate fellow at the Delhi Policy Group and member of the International Editorial Advisory Board of the journal South Asian History and Culture. Over to you, Tanweer. You have 20 minutes. At 15 minutes, I'll sort of start distracting you, and at 20 minutes, I'll speak over you. So apologies in advance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, the organizers, ADRI, and all those who make ADRI possible, and who have made this grand celebration of social science possible. My paper is titled Migrant, Home and Politics, Bihari Labor in Metropolis. And this is the kind of work which I have recently started getting interested in as per the introduction of the chair. I have largely earlier worked on nationalism, minoritism, etc. But this is an area which, because of certain triggers that you get interested into working in a new area. And this reason was, you see in and around you workers coming from Bihar who travel wherever in the country to again come across Bihari workers and labor. And you see a similar kind of a stigmatization associated with it. In most places they are also faced with similar problems, but also similar notions about home, house, and other things. This paper seeks to examine the subjectivities of migrant blue-collar workers, the most visible and the vulnerable among Biharis outside the state. This paper was conceived in the background of assembly elections in Bihar, and it follows that the questions of citizenship, idea of politics, and its relation to the migrant comprehension of home and non-home bear its imprints. In most anthropological work on migration, the home and the house are the two loci that stand in contrast. one being the migrant's most natural abode, and the other his or her adopted place, one to which he remains an alien. Both the imageries the paper contents fall short of portraying the immigrant social reality accurately. This paper examines the subjectivities regarding belongingness, alienation, and everyday politics of the worker in both the house and the home. The home is a domain of politics too, where the worker denied his or her full citizenship in migrant locations, or what is called house, seeks to exercise in the more familiar world of home. However, workers' involvement with home and politics varies and is structured by his or her social location, longevity of stay in host society, intergenerational mobility, etc. Around the end of 2009, Ludhiana, Punjab's industrial hub, reported fish street battles between local police and migrant workers in the city. This soon transformed into a conflagration between the workers and local Jat strongmen, with the former's homes being attacked and burned down. The partisanship of the local press was all too obvious as it unscrupulously exaggerated the role of the migrants, holding them responsible for taking to violence, even as that where the natives remained largely unreported. As part of a team of university teachers, we found that Ludhiana's migrant workers had been subjected to a far more insidious routine violence of relentless marginalization and violation of citizenship. Indeed, the category migrant itself was pregnant with the ideas of exclusion. Now, anthropological accounts of migration are replete with the migrants' retention of cultural patterns that they bring with them from the home society, and they continue to stick to them in the host society as well. This is what the anthropological understanding is. However, on the contrary, the workers living in Punjab made notable move towards assimilating with the host culture. Many of them spoke fluent Punjabi, sent their children to Punjabi medium schools. In the discourses, including the police and the press, they continued to be abusively referred to as Biharis or Bhaias. The process of cultural stigmatization perversely synchronized with their political exclusion and economic marginalization. Very few workers had been provided with ration cards or voter cards despite many continuous years of residence. An ethnically differentiated labor market had emerged in the industrial areas of Ludhiana, wherein the migrants were employed at rates far lower than the market of state-determined wages. Now, ironically, during the recent assembly elections 2015, reports from Punjab spoke of the mobilization of workers by different political parties to vote in their native villages in Bihar. It was said that an estimated 20 lakh Bihari workers work in Punjab, and they were being mobilized by BJP and others so that they could go back and vote for their parties in Bihar. Now, what was underlying these efforts to persuade the migrant Biharis to return to vote was the assumption that the workers were bereft of their politics in the state of their residence, that is Punjab in this case. She or he is disenfranchised in places of work and residence while being considered a right-bearing, conscious citizen at home. Now, we are all familiar with many of those who work on the migration sector. We're familiar with the fact that the Bihari migration or out migration of Bihar is not a new one. It is centuries old. It began at least one can note it from 18th century onwards, when the initial destination were Singh and other districts in Bengal. Then with the emergence of jute industry in the 19th century and the early 20th century, the Bihari workers started moving towards Calcutta and other sites where jute industry were there. And later on, we see that workers have also chosen to completely shift the migration destinations, and in the 1950s and 60s, we see that various other industrial sites also had started receiving the Bihari migrants. But at the same time, you should remember that Bihar is not the only state which is sending out migrants and migrant workers. In fact, if we see the case of Maharashtra, which received the largest number of migrants, in the period 1991 to 2000, the people from Bihar were far fewer in number than those from UP, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, and Gujarat. Amongst those even heading towards Delhi, the share of Bihar migrants was less than half of those from UP. A more or less similar pattern could be discerned from the state of Punjab, where the word Bihari has almost become a euphemism for the Hindi-speaking working population. So there are a lot of people who come from other Hindi-speaking belt, but all of them get, some way or the other this pejorative reference as Bihari. The choice of Delhi, where my field work was largely done, the choice of Delhi for large-scale population movement from Bihar seems to have come rather late in the day. Up till 2001, as one survey suggests, Bihar's share in the migrant population Delhi was, in the migrant population Delhi was 14%. Not in the population Delhi, but in the migrant population Delhi was 14%. A figure which rose more than twice to a phenomenal 31% by the year 2030. The shift towards metropolitan cities demanded an orientation different from that required from farm work, new skills and willingness to confront the pressures of a big city, and the workers seemed prepared to bring it. An overwhelming majority, nearly 86% in a city such as Delhi, are employed in the service sector as transport workers, construction laborers, repair mechanics, security guards, delivery persons, predominantly informal, most arduous, and least rewarding. A considerable proportion of the Bihari migrants today comprise a relatively also, it's not just that poverty pushes people out, but even prosperity takes to new migrant locations. So we have also a well-heeled middle class of white-collar workers who have chosen Delhi as their destination over a period of time. With this as the background, I suggest that the representation of home in diaspora studies, anthropological literature, and migration warrants a revamp. Unlike the classical anthropologists' obsession with totalizing spaces, fixed in time and space, frozen with social relationships and cultural routines, now those studying population movements discovered spaces that were frequently being visited and vacated by individuals and groups. French anthropologist Marc Orge thus argues for non-place as real measures of our times, when migration could be seen as the quintessential experience of the modern age. So non-place are transit points and temporary abodes, waiting rooms, refugee camps, malls, stations, hotels. For our non-place, which is beyond territory and society, are essential components of modern societies, and they atypically shape our identity. It follows that no place is completely itself, and therefore no place is completely other. People are always and never at ease with home. While Osh framed in terms of anxieties of identity of mobile individuals and groups, the anthropological construction of home produces other paradoxes. The home is not merely a product of remembrances and a locus for belonging, but also an outcome of an innate politics of exclusion that the migrants, essentially from low-income groups, are compelled to suffer in host societies. Rise of migration has also precipitated a concomitant burgeoning of particularisms. Eric Hobsbawm makes a distinction between him and hemat. Him is individual's memory, fantasy, longing. Him is impacted by hemat, which is an attempt collectively to impose home as a social fact and a cultural norm to which some claim authentic adherence and from which others must be excluded. Now I draw some tentative conclusions based on interviews conducted with Bihari workers employed as skilled, unskilled, and service sectors workers in Gurgaon of Bihar. The workers had variegated duration of migration from their native villages, had adopted distinct routes to eventually find employment here, and differ in terms of their skills, education, and social background. 45-year-old Suresh Prasad belongs to Vishnupura village in Bihar. He was the first person in his family to have left the village sometime around 1990, first moving to Chandigarh and later to Delhi and Gurgaon. In the meantime, he upgraded his skills and from a helper graduated to become a welder. Prasad belongs to Kharwa caste, whose members were traditionally employed as domestic workers in the houses of landlords. The family therefore owned a very small patch of land that was insufficient to provide a livelihood. It is difficult to categorize Suresh in either of the two binaries, seasonal or permanent migrant. He goes to the village twice a year during festivals and harvest time, usually for a short duration as long leave from his permanent employer is not easy to get. While in Chandigarh it was common to hear native workers complain that the influx of Biharis had lowered the prevailing wage rate, in Delhi, Suresh found Delhi was more welcoming. Almost all the workers came from outside, though the landlords who rented out dingy rooms to workers like Suresh were extremely exploitative. More than 2/3 of Suresh's monthly income is sent back to support his family and educate his two children. In his early 50s, Kailash Sharma has a longer history of migration. He left his village after completing his high school and trained in electricals from the local IIAS. The first destination was Calcutta in 1970, where his cousin secured him a job. He then moved to the ordnance factory Ratnakar in 1980 and thereafter to a private company in Delhi. For the last 30 years or so, Kailash has been employed in the same engineering unit where he has risen in seniority and stature. Over the years, his family, including two children and wife, joined him, all moving into a house which he has eventually bought. In fact, all of Kailash's brother took technical training, found employment, and ultimately settled in industrial towns such as Jamshedpur, Gurgaon, Bokaro. Leaving the village altogether has certainly helped the family secure significant intergenerational mobility. Kailash's children, the son and the daughter, completed their master's degree in business administration and have found white-collar employment in MNCs. For Kailash, home is laden with complexity. Village Thuve in Chhapra district of Bihar, where his family still owns a small piece of land, is his connect with his past, his lineage, his paternal kin. In his own words, his visits to the villages are limited to Acche and Bure Din, that is on occasions of marriage and death. Since Kailash has fully relocated to Gurgaon, he is not among those who regularly sends remittances back home. Neither is he involved in village politics, the contestation of power and entitlements. In 1994, when Kailash applied for a ration card in Gurgaon, he was required to get his name deleted from the village voter list and get the ration card terminated. However, when he had to marry his children, he looked for the spouses from among his castemen who came from the same region. Virendra Prasad, the third worker interviewed, began as a welder and has remained so. In 1987-88, he went in search of a job to Phagwara in Punjab because others from his village had found employment there. The work assigned to him in the factory at Phagwara was perilous, compelling him to move to Delhi, where again a fellow villager was instrumental in helping him find work. Before his elder son found employment in a speaker manufacturing factory in Gurgaon, Virendra was the only person from among his extended family to have moved out of the village. Back home, Virendra owns a small patch of land which is self-cultivated, but this hardly assures subsistence. Besides, farming itself requires regular investment. Like Suresh Prasad, Virendra too sends back most of what he earns and survives on a bare minimum. And again, like him, visits his village in Chhapra district a couple of times in the year, generally coinciding with sowing and harvest. Virendra maintains a close association with other village folk who live and work the village in the cities. So Virendra maintains a close association with other village folk who live and work in the city. The interaction with the city, however, is qualitatively different, touching as it does on the hardships of urban life, problems with the employer and the landlord, and so on. The village in the city is minus its politics. In his words, we are all with working people here, away from village. We did not meet as often in the village as we do here. Back home though, Virendra is not able to vote. However, he has no regrets, as in his absence, his kinsman or his son cast the ballot on his behalf. In the Ahi Tola where they reside, the caste elders collectively decide whom to vote for. In the recently concluded Bihar elections, all of his caste elders voted for Lalu's RJP, a choice which he feels is an outcome of rational decision making. During Lalu's tenure, 2 factories were set up in the area, one of which is still functioning. Besides, the Babu Sahibs too began to respect the Yadavs in the village. In Virendra's thinking, all talk of Mughal Raj was a mere figment of some people's imagination, and there was no difference between Lalu's rule and the regime that preceded or followed his. Kailash Sharma's family is upwardly mobile, facilitated by a longer urban experience which has ensured a degree of disconnect from the village. Though dissociated from everyday politics of the village, Kailash keenly followed the elections and hoped that Bihar would give a decisive mandate to the NDA's recovery. He claims to have been a Congress voter earlier, but during the Lok Sabha election of 2014, his entire family shifted to the BJP. Modi is sincere about bringing, as he says, Modi is sincere about bringing development and ending industrialization, but he needs time. During Nitish's rule, Bihar showed some semblance of development and tightening the law and order machinery. But his joining hands with Lalu is a setback. Besides, Lalu is extremely casteist. We need to leave the past behind, he argues. Then why did BJP lose the election if they had the positives on their side? This he felt was primarily because the BJP in Bihar is still dominated by the Babu Sahibs, who reproduce old hierarchies in their style of politics. Neither Kailash Sharma nor Virendra and Suresh Prasad are members of workers' unions. The small engineering unit in which they work have only a few permanent employees, most being contractual. For Virendra, it is not a factory, but the village which is his domain of politics and the context in which to visualize an alternative world. But for Kailash Sharma, now more or less a complete city dweller, the realm is the nation itself. Bihar is not isolated from the nation, but critical to its construction. Therefore, a victory for BJP in Bihar would have meant a triumph of his idea of the nation, industrially advanced and powerful. But why does Suresh Prasad remain evasive on the question of politics? Coming from one of the lowest caste and class locations, Suresh Prasad's interaction with other members of village is very limited. There is too much conflict in the village, so I don't like meeting them here as well. He regularly visits his village, but until recently did not possess a voter identity card. The question of traveling to the village just to vote does not arise as trains are crowded, tickets too expensive, and leaves are very short. In any case, nothing seems to change whoever comes to power. So why bother? He complains. In terms of existing power hierarchies, therefore, Suresh and his classmen remain outside the process of decision making. Politics offers scarcely any motivation or excitement. Land and labor and everyday indignities have remained inconspicuously absent from the national and vernacular public sphere. Nevertheless, the poor Indian do come out to vote. I'll just come to the conclusion. In the life of a migrant worker, the house and the home emerge as two spheres of existence. Nevertheless, both are valid. The house is marked by its temporality, which, while being no less power-laden, is politically inert. The worker ceases to be a full citizen within the house, while he idealizes the home to reclaim what he seems to have lost in the house. It is difficult, however, to separate the two, the house and the home, into neat compartments. Experiences may vary, but migrant locations that travel apart also leave the workers with certain sense of accomplishment and meanings of life. On the other, the home, like Habermas' Heman, could also be a social construction rather than a real memory. For anthropology, a truly migrant perspective could be one that seeks to see home and migrant locations not in a relationship of opposition, but simply a mode of being. I conclude with this quotation from Paul Carter, who, in Living in a New Country, writes, "It becomes ever more urgent to develop a framework of thinking that makes the migrant central, not ancillary, to historical process. We need to disarm the genealogical rhetoric of blood, property, and frontiers, and substitute for it a lateral account of social relations. An authentically migrant perspective would perhaps be based on an intuition that the opposition between here and there is itself a cultural construction, a consequence of thinking in terms of fixed entities and defining in opposition. It might begin by regarding movement not as an awkward interval between fixed points of departure and arrival, but as a mode of being in the world." Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also for sticking to time. If there are any specific questions for Tanweer at this moment, you could address them now. If there are broader questions, you can raise them and we'll come back to it later. But if there are any specific questions or points of clarifications, that's something that you could raise now. But I thought it was a very interesting way of conceptualizing this home and house and the blurring boundaries between them and the continuities between them. I would like us to think a little more about what the concept of non-place does, but we can come back to that later in Q&A. If there are no questions, I'll move on to the next speaker. Yes, Professor Ghosh.
I'm not talking the home part, but the politics part. I think, if I might, I'm not an study, but my own impression is that the political behavior of a migrant and political behavior of a non-migrant differs. It differs in the sense that even if they are not very literate, the cognitive world of a migrant is a wider, because he has seen larger world in Delhi or in spite of being not so learned in their cognitive bodies. But what I wanted to see is that we have to distinguish his political behavior at home. They come back for voting they receive some part. And their political behavior at the place where they have money. You know, in Delhi nowadays, Dubai has a special constituency for which many people ask. So when you do this analysis, keep this distinction in mind. The political behavior of migrant has to be seen, one in the context of what is their home and what they're doing in the place of their migration.
Thank you. I think that point is taken. Maybe we will come back to it at the end. But it is important to think about, and it didn't come up very clearly. Maybe you had said it and I missed it.
Yeah,
but
this is just a suggestion.
the political ideas in the destinations. It seemed to me that there were political beings at home. We were talking about their votes for RJD, etc., but not so much what they thought at the destinations. Any other quick questions or comments before we move on? Okay, I take that as no. Thank you very much. We move to the next speaker. That's Ratnakar Tripathy. He joins us from Shimla. He joins us from Shimla. He's currently a fellow at the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, where he's carrying out an ethnographic study of the regional entertainment industry with a comparative focus on the Hindi heartland. He has been a senior research fellow at ADRI, where he did research projects and wrote on themes such as Bhojpuri cinema, regional music industry, etc. He has published on migration from Bihar, transnational migration among Indian knowledge workers as well. With a focus on the regional languages in the Hindi heartland, he has carried out fieldwork in Haryana and plans to map out other language cultures in the Hindi region. Over to you, Ratnakar. Like with the previous speaker, you have 20 minutes. At 15 minutes, I'll start distracting you. At the end of 20 minutes, I'll speak.
Thank you. And I'll thank my institution, ADRI, as well, for giving this chance to come here and read a paper on my favorite theme. I'll start with a slightly extreme proposition. Consider that as an attempt to dramatize and kind of put a rubric under word migration. I feel that migration is central to the Bihari identity. So much so that in 2014 I had to use in a paper the notion of vicarious migrant. And as you know, it is extremely funny usage. But the reason I did that is because, you know, the person who stays at home listens to the stories that are brought to it within his ken. And in a sense, he is a migrant too. Also, objectively, our lives are so thoroughly entangled with migration of various sorts that I'm not sure it's possible to define any kind of Bihari identity, however vaguely, without talking of migration. Having said that, I'll read out what I've written for this occasion. To understand the utter centrality of migration to Bihar, one simply has to remember the magic behind the word Videsia and remind oneself that the very foundations of modern popular culture in Bihar were laid with this play by Bihari thought. The pivotal role of the distant city in Bihari culture remains intact to this day in the songs and the videos circulating among the ordinary Biharis at home or abroad. My presentation is based on such sources and an ongoing study of the migratory patterns observed since my childhood in my own village in Bihar. While I will try to refresh my memory of the last 50 years or so with the aid of conversations with the aged villagers, I plan to have a series of conversations with the younger age groups to map out the mobility pattern in the last 10 to 20 years among two groups of people, very broadly classified, sorry for the long sentence, as skilled, educated, and semi or non-skilled, uneducated, semi-literate or literate. Tiwaritola, my village, lies at a distance of roughly 4 kilometers from Piparakoti railway station, the nearest town being Motihari at a distance of 10 kilometers, also the district headquarters for East Champaran in Bihar. Based on my experiences in the village and elsewhere, I am driven to hypothesize that while the educated sections emigrate on a permanent or near permanent basis, the less educated folk follow various kinds of cyclical migrations. Similarly, while it is mostly seen that whereas the educated migrants often end up extracting ancestral wealth out of Bihar, the uneducated seem to bring in relatively large amounts of money into their domestic economies. In fact, even when the remittances are not very substantial or guaranteed, which may often be the case, they play the role of hedging risks incurred in an agricultural economy based on small holdings or sharecropping. Typically, a family with several brothers may split into two strategic groups: women and those men who are responsible for agricultural work at home, and men who find different destinations to earn money to support the rural household. The article thus focuses on two major aspects of the migratory movement in Bihar that seems central enough to be seen as the overall meaning of migration, as seen from the viewpoint of the migrants and their families. These are, number one, risk mitigation, and number two, avoidance. Before confronting the above two issues, I will dwell briefly on the semantics and the vocabulary of migration and focus on a group of three different words employed in Bhojpuri and Hindi: Videsiya, Pardesi, and Palayan. The etymologies of these words indicate the layered nature of the social attitude towards migration among the different sections of the society. The folk culture of the region suggests that since the very early days, migration has been associated with the problems resulting from prolonged absence, reducing the status of the immigrant to a foreigner, if one takes the semantics literally. Both the words Videsiya and Pardesi, commonly used by the rural folk, etymologically mean the foreigner. Palayan, as the official and journalistic term for migration, is equally off-center and loaded, implying a whole theory of migration, despite having emerged from deep educated sources. Palayan literally means running away, thus turning the emigrant into a renegade. The reason for this may be that the elite segments who acquire decent middle-class jobs in the cities rule the conceptual domain and impose their own profile on the entire immigrant population, including those who as cyclical migrants contribute massively to the rural economy. It is likely that the cultural attitude towards migration is inherently ambivalent globally. I plan to prepare a glossary actually in different Indian languages. Even in Tamil, the commonly used word Pardesi is a term of mild abuse. Although both other common usages, Pulam Periyandur and Pudi Periyandur, are somewhat neutrally descriptive, meaning to move out of the country area. To come back to the main theme, just my mitigation and avoidance. Over the years, looking at the different caste groupings in my village, I have been slowly but consistently driven to conclude that with the changing caste dynamic, the villagers continue to modify their conduct and attitude towards each other on a daily basis as a form of ongoing social learning. An illustration would do here. The 2-3 Brahmin families known for their violence and abusive language towards the lower caste in the decades 1960 to 85, when I was growing up, are not in a position to continue with the practice, and their foul curses have to be uttered inaudibly under their breaths. Similarly, in recent years, I have been pleasantly startled by individuals from the Chamar and Kumar castes addressing me as Bhaiya, brother. When I put my arm around their shoulders, they react with a bold friendliness rather than shrink in dread at the unusual gesture, as would be the case earlier. Despite these overt signs of parity, the fact is, I have noticed that the communication among the upper caste and the lower strata is a rather strained, though the Yadavs traditionally seem to be greatly privileged in being allowed to behave chattily with the Brahmins. I come from a Brahmin background. In my observation, I found that conversation among Brahmins and the lower castes generally remains confined to the daily functionality and seems economical rather than effusive, though on special occasions a certain laxity of behavior may be observed. This is why I feel the need to emphasize a certain unceasing and fidgety element of reciprocal distancing, for which I have chosen to use the term avoidance. Given the fast changing dynamic of the caste relations in my village over the decades, there's a lack of a settled stance and position from which the villagers may converse with each other. It's like a relationship changing forever and being unable to develop any kind of a protocol. Lack of clarity on the permitted degree of familiarity is thus a hindrance in communication. With the changing equilibriums in nearly all aspects of life, the different castes are unable to put in place protocols to extensive communication and thus stick to a safe threshold to avoid conflicts and direct confrontations, thus in effect avoiding each other beyond the point of necessity. In a larger sense and at a macro scale, I also feel that ever since the 1970s, when the lower castes took to migration on a large scale and improved their lot, the upper castes also began to abandon the conflicted public spaces, leaving the state in large numbers on a permanent basis. Often what began as temporary migration for education or job gradually perpetuated into an undoable passage and shift to distant locations. The following generations often do not even express nostalgia for their native village, and the families end up disposing of their ancestral property. For the above reasons, I have begun to see avoidance not simply as a strategy applied on a micro or individual level, but as a grander phenomenon that pervades the relation of the upper and lower castes. To put things a bit more explicitly, the two social segments, higher and upper castes, very broadly equated with the skilled and unskilled migrants, emigrate to avoid each other and to obviate occasions for friction and conflict. This is clearly a reflection on the quality of the social life in my village. The avoidance seems so comprehensive and prevalent, as well as almost entirely tacit, that it has acquired the status of a fundamental norm in the village society. What I propose is that such a state of affairs has come to be seen as a given in the long run. The educated among the village, in turn, may be seen to be divided into two columns: the relative elite, the migratory initiative and resourcefulness to successfully abandon the village on a permanent basis, and those unable to fulfill their migratory urges. In a symmetrical fashion, even the uneducated among the villagers are divided along similar lines into those fortunate enough to send some of their family members to proximate and distant job destinations through the help of migratory networks. I have vividly seen the disdain of the immigrant labor, disdain the immigrant labor has for the sedentary relatives and neighbors. In turn, the non-immigrant's envy of his immigrant neighbor may be seen rather obviously. While the long-term cyclicality of mobility among the uneducated results in a steady infusion of income in the rural households, such flow is glaringly missing in the educated families. Of course, this broad picture needs to be nuanced by admitting that I also meet several Brahmins youths whose garbled reports on the nature of work in Punjab or Haryana clearly indicates the rather un-Brahmin-like jobs they're compelled to take up. These may include tailoring or even cleaning jobs, as I discovered at a complex of public toilets in Shimla run by upper caste youths, who are likely to conceal the fact even from their immediate families in the village. What the uneducated do with the remittances received from their kin is a variegated story. I found that in extreme case, a family with a steady income from the family head had turned it. I found that in an extreme case, a family with a steady income from the family head had turned it indifferent, I think there's a grammatical error, had turned it indifferent to agricultural work and any form of productive investment, including the education of the children, was completely missing. But I found through numerous conversations with a variety of caste members that the uppermost concern is to acquire more land for agriculture and build a decent home. While constructing a home is quite feasible, I found that due to the scarcity of available land, many a time a migrant spent an entire month seeking a seller but had to go to work after little success. It is not unusual for my family members and me to receive calls from some such migrants, urging us to sell a parcel of land, even though our property is not divided yet, and any sale by an individual would be deemed illegal in the courts. The eager buyer, however, is often willing to incur the risks involved. It is rare for a migrant to urge his family to invest in agricultural inputs, to increase the productivity, and the focus is almost as a rule confined to mitigating the risks that necessarily go with agricultural activities. The upper caste families in the village, despite their poverty, are however willing to invest in the children's education by arranging and paying for tutors, the private coaches that fulfill a massive demand created by the paucity of quality education in the government-run schools. I would thus like to, I'm coming to the concluding part. I would thus like to hypothesize that the two factors have succeeded in maintaining a sense of minimal equilibrium, allowing the governments to devote some attention to routine governance and development work instead of umpiring over a landscape choking with innumerable conflicts. Along with this go the distortions in public life in the village, with little spontaneity in daily social conversations among the different social groupings. At a pan-Bihar level, I suspect that such dissonant and non-communicative behavior by both the segments, our culture is split at the seams between the lower caste / semi-literate who consume and create our popular culture and the educated who with nearly nil contribution devote inordinate amounts of their cultural energy in condemning what the less fortunate Biharis can afford. Rather symmetrically, there are many islands of Bihar outside Bihar at sites like Delhi who have become a substantial vote bank, the mainstays of the agricultural economy in Punjab or the diamond industry in Gujarat and the construction industry in the northeast. Social continuities thus seem to lead us, social discontinuities thus seem to lead us to cultural and perhaps even political discontinuities due to the numerous breaches in the communication chain. And I come to this conclusion from background of the ethnographic work I've done on Bhojpuri cinema, Bhojpuri music in Bihar and eastern Uttar Pradesh, and also in Haryana, and currently I'm doing similar work in Himachal. And I do find that there is a certain kind of a cultural continuum that you see in the case of Haryana and also Himachal. But in the case of Bihar, a kind of several gulfs that seems to be characteristic of our culture currently. I'm not sure if it's part of our identity, but certainly so at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the interesting time. Are there any specific questions for Ratnakar? And then we'll see whether he answers them or not. Yes, sir.
Hello, sir. It was nice to talk on the migration, meaning of migration from Bihar, from top to bottom. I have just little query that all the time, whenever we talk about the migration, we are talking about the migratory pattern, like skilled, unskilled, and just another side, we are talking about the caste, like people are from their specific caste are going outside Bihar or somewhere. Is it okay that in present scenario, rather than focusing more attention on the skilled and unskilled labor, we are talking about casteism, that the Yadav groups are going from Bihar more and some other caste. So just I want to ask, how is it right to talk about the migration on the basis of caste, or it should be talked on the basis of their skill or unskilled pattern?
I think that's a question you can come back to later, because that demands a broader than just a quick response.
Related to the same topic, I wanted to ask that you told that upper caste, they were using these remittances for education of children and acquiring more land, whereas the lower caste people, they are using it for risk bearing or something like that.
No.
It was not.
I'm not talking of remittances in the context of the upper caste level. And I know I'm conflating a lot of things. It's more like upper caste / upper class, yeah, and educated.
So is that here?
So this is a bit of a blur, but there is some reality at the core. And please don't take them to be serious conceptual tools over here. Yeah, because out of all this, you do get a certain kind of a profile of a population, the educated.
So it is the educated people who are using this means they are using using this money for their education of children or something like this. Is it that?
Well,
Is education playing some role in this migration? The people who are educated, they are using this money for education of their children or acquire land. Whereas the people who are not educated, they are using this.
I'll tell you empirically what the situation is. When I visit my village, I see long queues, almost like a procession of kids running from this tutor to that tutor and so on and so forth. This is a regular thing, that happens routinely in the mornings and in the evenings. Yeah, and most of these children are from the upper caste families, although some from the lower caste families. And then there are certain caste features. For example, the Chamar kids are much more numerous than the other kids.
So can we say that education is also playing a role here?
Okay, and I think that you'll have a chance to respond to that. Are there any other questions for Ratnakar? Very quick. Yes, sir. Right at the back. Mic.
I can also speak loudly.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks for your talk, Ratnakar. There is no denial of the fact that the nature of this migration is circular. But I'm also trying to think, and this might sound very speculative, if we think about this migration through the idea and concept of home, which can be seen as a conceptual category or even metaphorically understanding the idea of home, there seems to be the migration, the nature of the migration entails a kind of a transformation from kacha home to pakka home. Having a dhalai chhat, a cemented chhat on your roof is very important way to explain why people are migrating to get money back and there's an idea of permanence to this home. Will this idea of permanence bring linearity to the otherwise circular nature of migration? So can we interject linearity in the overall structure of the circular migration? That's one question. And can we identify certain sites like home or some other sites? The idea of home is coming from the top of my head. One more question, please. And this is out of selfish reason, personal interest.
Do you want to answer this?
Yeah.
Okay.
So very quickly, I'll have to be very brief over here. I agree with Tanweer that I agree with him in not making sedentary sort of assumptions that to be in the same place is normal and that to move is something unusual. I'm not sure about that anymore because after my two major projects on migration, it seems that it's very normal to move. And historically, if you look at take a long duration view of history, and there's a lot of movement there. And I'm glad you used the word the idea of home. There are people somewhat in the manner of Kerala who are spending a lot of money in building their houses. I'm not sure they're going to be living there for a long time. I'm not sure about the next generations.
Did you have a second question? Do you want to ask that?
Yeah.
Or can it wait till after the...
It can wait as
Okay,
well.
then we'll wait. Any other questions for Ratnakar immediately? Okay. I do have a comment on your use of the terms upper caste and lower caste, and I wonder where that was coming from. Was it your vocabulary? Was it vocabulary that you were hearing from the field? But that's something you could comment, reflect on maybe in the Q&A. If we move on to Amrita, who's our next speaker. Amrita is an associate fellow at the Institute of Human Development in New Delhi and a doctoral researcher at the International Institute of Social Sciences, Erasmus University, Rotterdam. Unfortunately, I have only these two sentences to introduce you, so if there's anything else you want to say by way of introducing yourself.
Before I start, I'll give you a background to the paper that I'm going to present. And first, Many thanks for the organizers to invite me here. It's really been a very stimulating conference about the paper. So this paper is it draws on long-term work which is happening in rural Bihar, and the first of which was the study which was conducted in the early 1980s at the ANCNA Institute in Patna, where surveys were conducted across Bihar in 6 districts then to understand several issues, but broadly in issues related to labor, employment, and poverty, and also to understand the whole caste and class question at that point. Since 2009, IIAS has been doing these surveys in those villages and to broadly understand social change, broad social and economic change. And I've been working on those surveys, and I work mainly on issues related to migration. Now, one of the main methodological issues is that we collect information about migrants. Any source survey would collect information about migrants in the source region from household members and who may not be migrants. So we're collecting a whole lot of information. Our perspective of migration in the rural comes from many non-migrants as well. So to sort of understand migration also at the point of destination, it's only natural that one expands the geography of research, and that is one of the main motivations for this paper. So what I've done is I've tried to I've tried to follow families in the city where migrant workers are working, and also done fieldwork with members in source areas to sort of try and synthesize rural and urban perspectives. So with that background, I'll start the paper. India's rapid economic growth in the post-liberalization era has been accompanied by increased labor migration from poor to prosperous regions, from backward to advanced states, and from rural to urban areas. Against this backdrop, the eastern Indian state of Bihar has witnessed unprecedented outflow of males from its villages, while women, children, and elderly stay behind. These new mobilities have brought about fundamental changes in rural livelihoods. There is growing research on internal migration in India, but most of this is limited to its economic aspects. The social cost of migration, the affective experiences of migrants and those left behind, and young people's voices don't get much attention. So this paper uses case studies of 2 young migrants from a village in eastern India to compare and contrast their migration experiences in the same urban destination. The paper is based on fieldwork with migrant workers in the city and their family members in the village. These family case studies also have a longitudinal element drawn from households of which rich information is available in earlier surveys in 1998 and 2009. So the focal point of this research is Maisham, a village located in Madhubani district in the northeastern India of Bihar. It's a multi-caste village where Brahmins and Muslims are the dominant caste. Brahmins are among one of the 4 upper castes in Bihar, and Muslims are much lower in the ascribed economic and social hierarchy. Migration, however, offers significant upward mobility for communities, especially in the unfavorable end of the social spectrum. So Mahisham has always been a high migration village. In 1999, more than 50% of the families were migrant members. By 2011, this increased to 78%. In the same period, while income from remittances marginally increased, that from agriculture substantially declined. These changing sources of income in Mahisham reflect a shift towards non-agricultural and other external sources of income in the village economy. As has been noted in other studies, migration from this region is youth and male dominated, and as is in this village. Migration is also predominantly to distant labor markets across urban India. There's a stream of migration to agricultural work in rural northwestern India, but this has declined over time. While migration has become longer term, it remains circular. Most migrants leave the city in their adolescent years and eventually return to the village after working in the city. It's a model where men migrate, leaving behind women, children, and old people, and the migrants remain connected to the village by remittances and revisits. For this paper, I draw from detailed case study material, interview recordings, and fieldwork in the city and the village of 2 migrant workers from Mahisham to Delhi. The two research participants are subset of 10 migrants with whom I conducted interview and field work in NCR, Delhi between May and October 2014. This was followed up with fieldwork with their family members and other key informants in Sham in November 2014. The entry point to the urban migrants was through an earlier rural survey in their households. So I will take you through the case study of the two migrants. The first of whom is JM. JM is a 23-year-old Hindu man. He completed class 12 in the village in 2006. For the next 2 years, there was nothing to do. He says, he enrolled in a college in a nearby town for time pass. He decided to come to the city to study, but I did not have the money, so it took me a long time to establish myself, said JM. In 2008, when he finally came to Delhi, it was his first trip so far away, and he remembered that he was scared. Suddenly, he tells me gigglingly, but then his tone becomes very serious, and he said, suddenly he said seriously, every young person in the village, they think they have to go to Delhi, to Punjab. There's nothing there, which is why they come here, he said, referring to Delhi. In Delhi, JM got a job at a travel firm through an uncle's reference. He worked as a data entry operator from 9 p.m. to 3:30 a.m. and earned 3,500 rupees every month. Slowly, as I earned money bit by bit, I started studying, he said. First, he joined a computer training course. A few months into the job, he enrolled himself in a distant education bachelor's degree. He attended tuition classes during the day and worked in the night and slept in between when he found time. He says, I purposefully chose to work in the night shift so that I could attend classes during the day. He explained with a sense of determination. Jem worked in this position for 2 years. It was a desk job that entailed sending emails and uploading data on the computer. He learned the work of the job, and once in a while, he was able to earn some extra money when his employer sent him to the airport to unload cargo. He explained that he wouldn't be caught doing manual labor in the village on a counter with upper caste status, but he had no inhibition in doing such work in the city. It didn't require much effort, and it offered extra earnings, he said. In 2011, he completed his graduation and was promoted to the designation of a transport executive. His salary increased to 5,500 rupees per month, and he remitted about 1,000 to 1,500 rupees back home every month. His work timings were 11 to 8 p.m. and Sundays were off. His job profile also required him to go on tour to deliver consignment, an experience he valued very much. I was able to travel extensively across the country, he says, with a twinkle in his eye. At the same time, a plan to start something of his own was brewing in his head. Jim thought it would be a good idea to start my own business. And he said, I thought it would be a good idea to start my own business. I had become completely trained in the cargo line, movers and packers, local cargo, international cargo. I'd learned the tricks of the trade, unquote. In January 2013, JM quit his job to start a business. Risk lene se life banta hai, he explained, with a cool and confident air. He invested about 1 lakh rupees, which included the entire money he got from his Provident Fund to start his own company called the Koshi Cargo Services. And so this is very interesting. He called the company the Koshi Cargo Services, and because he comes from the area and he was very, very passionate about the name of this company. As a migrant in the city and as a maiden entrepreneur, he struggled with paperwork. I had a lot of problems obtaining a registration from the government. There was no address proof, bank account. When I saw him manage, he laughed and said, like, it's done, I did whatever I could. I had to pay a bribe. He advertises his business on portals such as Sulekha and IndiaMart. In the morning every day, he checks his account online, connects with people who have put up requirements and negotiates the deal, and gets the work done. He works 7 days a week. Hamara koi chutti nahi hai. I have no leave, he said. But it is my own work, apna kaam, he says with a sense of pride. But it's a lot of work. He smiled. This gendered nature of apna kaam, its inherent masculinities need to be unpacked. It's driven by desperation and economic compulsion, majboori, yet sustained through pride, passion, and confidence. His business is doing well. The day I met him, he had a courier packet that went to London, and he also received 2 business calls in the middle of his interview. He's able to earn 20 to 22,000 rupees every month. He remits 5,000 rupees back to his family in the village. From profits from his business, he has been able to free his family's mortgage land, renovate part of his house in the village, and pay for his sister's wedding. Despite his success, migration is very bad, JM said. It's the worst kind of hell, he feels. I learned everything due to desperation and compulsion. I was able to start a business because of my passion. I had no plans of staying in the city. Jim elaborates eventually that he would return to the village and start a court farm. He feels that his plan is realistic as Bihar is experiencing high growth and work opportunities in the state are increasing. In James' narrative, there emerges a clear paradox of success in his professional life as a migrant, yet unsettledness about his place in the city. While he values his accomplishment there, he is wary of what it may hold for him. His calculated emotional disconnect from the city needs to be located in his worldview, where he perceives urban morass to be a threat to his rural values and a way of life in the village, one that he is both nostalgic about and proud of. James' parents live in the village in a mud hut with thatched roof. There is no toilet or regular electricity connection. There is a flat screen TV and LPG stove that have been recently acquired through remittances. James' mother has never been to Delhi. Apart from one annual visit to her natal place and another pilgrimage, she rarely ventures out of her home. Restricted mobility of women in the upper caste is a norm in the village, and Padda is prevalent in the Brahmin community. Her domestic duties keep her busy. I never get free from work at home. How can I go? She asked. Of course I feel like meeting my son, but I cannot imagine leaving home, she said. Jim visits the village several times in a year. When he comes home, I'm overjoyed. When he leaves, I weep. She said that it takes her a while to get back to normal after Jim leaves each time. But he is better off in Delhi, she whispered. There are many facilities, there are advantages, there is Vikas. Jim's father is a peasant who cultivates and also hires in labor. He has 1.5 acres of own land and leases in 1 bigha of land where he grows vegetables, paddy, wheat, and mustard. He's passionate about farming and proud of his vegetable farm. He tells me that the earnings from agriculture help him make ends meet, but remittances are necessary to sustain the household. The father and son are in constant touch over mobile phone to discuss matters related to their work and home. I asked him where he would prefer his son to stay, in Delhi or in the village. He said about the village, and I quote, "There is no development here, no proper water, electricity. In Delhi, the facilities are good. For now, it is good for him to be there." Jim's younger brother dropped out of school after high school as he was not interested in studying further. In 2011, he went to Delhi and stayed there with his brother for a year. He learned how to repair mobile phones. Upon his return to the village, he opened a shop in a nearby town with financial support from his family. He's trying to start a mobile repair business. I asked Jim's father if his younger son helps him in the farm. The father retorts, "You expect a mobile mechanic to get into the mud?" He says only illiterate and old people work in agriculture. "Jo padh likh gaya usko really dikhta hai." He is ambivalent if his son would return to the village. But I would want him to be by my side when I grow older, especially in times of need. If he is close to me, then I would be in peace, unquote. I briefly take you to the next case study now, which is of MG. MG is a 23-year-old Muslim man. When MG was 14, he had an argument with his father and he ran away from home with another friend. Together, the two boys boarded a train and traveled more than 1,000 kilometers from Bihar to Delhi. Upon reaching Delhi, they went to a cinema hall, a landmark they had heard about in Migrant's conversations back in the village. They traced their fellow villagers in the city and with the help of a village contact, they obtained work in a fan factory, where they worked 12-hour shifts 6 days a week. For a year and a half, the 14-year-old boys did this work, after which MG returned. He visited the village. MG found it hard to cope. When I came, I was small. I did not understand a thing. I missed my mother very much. I felt terrible. I used to hold the wall and cry. Now, living away from village, living in Delhi, it's become a habit, adat ho gayi hai. Upon his return from the village to Delhi, he worked in a gearbox factory for 7 years and tried to establish a drinking water trolley business as suggested by a fellow villager. His enterprise failed once before it finally took off. "I was running after money," he explained. "I was ready to work hard and clock as many hours of work as were necessary to earn more." Through the course of his wage work in the city, he remitted about half of his salary back home to his family in the village. MG has 4 younger brothers. One by one, they followed me to Delhi, he said. In 2001, a brother joined him in the city and started working in the same factory where he worked. In 2005, a second brother came to the city in search of work. Though MG was happy working at the gearbox factory, he thought the water trolley business made sense and decided to try his luck at it again. As his brothers joined him in Delhi in 2000, he expanded his business. At the time of fieldwork in May 2014, MG had 7 water trolleys across the city on contract from the municipality, for which he paid 2 lakh rupees annually. The water season in Delhi peaked in the summer and lasts 5-6 months, he explained. The 5 brothers and 2 relatives manage 1 trolley each and sell water at designated points in West Delhi. A typical day for MG starts at 4 a.m. when he fills all the trolleys with drinking water, and comes back home, dressed, goes back to work again to sell water at a bus stop. He returns home about 9 p.m. and sleeps at 10 and wakes up to the same routine the next day. There is no weekly off or holiday. This is my own work, apna kaam. I have freedom in this work, he says. I work according to my own will and not to the whims of some employer, he tells me proudly. MG has taken recurrent loans to support his water business. Recently, he took another loan to purchase land, a first, and renovate the family home in the village. These are all sourced from the village at an interest rate of 4 to 5% per month. For him, these loans are a positive development. These loans are an investment for a better future, he explains. MG lives in a room 10 feet long and 8 feet wide with his 4 brothers and 2 relatives in an urban sprawl in West Delhi. He's been living in the same room for the last 9 years in the same neighborhood since 1999 when he migrated to Delhi. He knows little of Delhi beyond this locality where he works and lives. Though MG is friends with both fellow villagers and natives of Delhi, he doesn't like it in the city. There is no izzat, no vyabhar. Logo ko sirf paisa dikhta hai. People see only money, he said. We feel like outsiders. We have to be careful about what we say. In the village, we have the freedom to speak our mind. Here, we keep quiet. MG goes to the village twice every year and helps in the family farm during the paddy and wheat harvesting season. We brothers spend 2-3 months in the village every year. There is no work. One person is enough to attend to the small farm. Yet, I go to the village every year, several times. And when I have to leave the village, I feel terrible. Now we have mobile phones. There's no problem in communication. I talk to my family members in the village every day. If we don't call even for a single day, they give us missed calls. In the village, I meet MG's family. His parents live with 3 daughters-in-law and 7 grandchildren. The 17-member household is spread across the village and the city. Every month, MG remits 15,000 rupees for their family members to get by. MG's father has never migrated for work. He cultivates wheat and paddy in leased-in land and tends to livestock. He used to work as an agricultural labor earlier, but doesn't work on other people's fields anymore. Back in those days when MG had left for the first time, there were lots of difficulty. Wages were low and work was limited. We ate only 1 meal a day. Things are all right. Things are all right now. We eat well and wear good clothes, he says. I'll quickly rush through MG. Yeah, MG. So there's also his mother and who's visited to Delhi very briefly for family emergencies and health. There's his brother whose family lives in the village. So it's clearly a household which has links to both the village and the city, and MB is ambivalent about how long he will stay in the village. Earning money is a lot of hard work here. People come here to earn money while their family members live in tension in the village. If I get a job in the village tomorrow, I will leave today, is what MG said. So it emerges from the case study that apna kaam, which migrants call their own work, is valuable to the research participants. Independent working is deeply integral to a sense of pride and success. It's driven by desperation and compulsion, majboori, but sustains through pride, passion, and confidence. While young men work hard and cultivate relationships to build their businesses, they seem to have no emotional connection to the city. We've seen earlier that the stream of migration is predominantly circular. These men literally work their whole lives in the city and move back to the village. That they choose not to engage with the city can be understood through normative and gendered discourses wherein the city is a bad place. The women go out to work, their women must be protected and remain in the village. The children grow up here without respect. Their children must stay in the village and learn the right values and be disciplined. Indeed, these are calculated steps to keep them emotionally connected to the village. I've discussed elsewhere that rural migrants are isolated from the going down in the city. Their energies are concentrated in working long hours so as to be able to maximize their income, send remittances to support their rural families, about whom they remain anxious and worried. The social role is constructed around a closely knit circle of kith and kin. It is as if the village is reconstructed in the urban sprawl. There's little time or scope for leisure, a game of cricket, a visit to the cinema, or a trip to the mall. All of these are mostly shunned. The simple idea of having fun is not engaged with, which is purposeful to the process of emotional wall building. Young men do this type of emotional wall building day in and day out in order to make their eventual return to the village easier. And just quickly, so broadly, this multi-sited and multi-generational fieldwork, it does demonstrate that young people work actively towards fulfilling their own desires, that of their families and their spouses, and silently they work towards their goals, negotiating family needs and their personal needs. They also saw that children don't play a passive role in migration, and they are active agents in their own migration. Their own childhood experiences shape what these young men want for their families and their children. They draw upon everyday lived experience of migrants and find that migrants create their own identity in the city. And at the same time, research participants contribute to a household whose production and maintenance goes on in the village. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Again, at this point, I'd like to ask if there are any specific questions for Amrita, and then we go on to Q&A for all three panelists. Crispin, is that a specific question for Amrita?
Yes, very specific.
Yes, thank you.
Who looks after the family farm at home? That's it.
Okay. If there's a one-word answer, you can do it now, otherwise just wait.
She said there was a father and there was a brother.
So, I'll have to explain.
So you'll have to explain, then we'll come back to it.
Yeah,
Yes, if it's complicated, we'll come back. Are there any other specific questions for Amrita, which will elicit yes, no type responses or points of clarification?
I have to
We'll wait for that for all three. We'll come back to the Q&A if there's any point of clarification. Okay, Amrita, it also seemed to me that there were certainties in the circulation. You speak about circular labor migrants, and of course you said that how they were circulating between town and country, but I wondered if there was the kind of certainty that you suggest, or were there more uncertain iterations than very certain circulations, but that's something you can reflect on and come back to later. Okay, so now we open up for Q&A for all three of our panelists. They've all presented their reflections on a very, very complex process. They've all stepped back from the very conventional sorts of analysis, which is not to say that that's not important, but that's been done, and now there's a lot of value that's being added by bringing in the affective dimension of migration, the ideational aspect of migration, the kinds of identities, social, political, and cultural identities that are being forged through these mobilities. So it's a remarkably very rich set of papers. Are there questions for the panelists around more general, more reflective? Sir, right at the back. Can you speak without the mic?
I'll try.
No, that's fine. We'll get the mic over to you.
Hello. Thank you so much for underlining the centrality of migration to whatever we are at this juncture. So the way I have understood it is like at the one end of this pattern is despair or hope, which somehow causes one to migrate to places in which is implicit some kind of hope, which the place to which we are migrating probably has for us. And along with it is the agony, sometimes violent reactions, the attitude of people in places to where the migrant laborers or other kinds of migrants in many cases go and settle down and work. The case of Bombay is one point. So thinking along this line, I'm wondering whether we can think also about the absence or presence or of political mobilization at home. For example, if there is despair of certain kind, could it be that because of the state's failure, despite the remarkable success that has been noted recently by many scholars? So how does it relate to the question of migration, out-migration? Like, has there been some mobilization to put more pressure on the state to perform better? Would it be different, and how does it relate to the question of political mobilization at home. Thank you.
Was it directed towards any?
No, sorry. I think three presenters can probably. Yeah.
Should we collect a couple of questions? Yeah. So, right at the back and then.
Thanks a lot for this amazing presentation. My name is Prakash and I'm from University of Iowa. I have a question with regards to the language of migration that these people whom we have interviewed and interacted with use. I'm interested the information that Professor Tripathy mentioned, which was with regards to the word padayan. Why I'm asking is, what is the vocabulary that they are actually using in whatever languages you're talking, whether it's English, Maithili, Bhojpuri, Hindi, or some dialect of Hindi which is prevalent in different centers where you're staying. The other is also the phenomenon in language with regards to jokes, for instance. I'm aware of a group of Maithil migrants who stay in Kolkata, and when they talk about their own identities in the midst of Bengalis, they would often use these expressions. For instance, "Padabo" is one of the common phrases used in jokes that are used to mock Bengalis and their lack of masculinity. So they associate certain kind of masculinity with this. So I'm wondering if you came across jokes, talks, gossips, where the same vocabulary is used in different ways to give expression to sexuality, identity. Thank you.
Thank you. And up here in front. Right in front.
Thank you for all the presentation, very interested. And the three of them refer to case studies. And I would like to think of a little bit wider. I'm referring to the same database of Amrita, of the 36 villages. And the incidence of migration is varied widely among villages. It goes from 26% of the households having migrants to some other villages at 85%. And I think what is interesting is the influence of migration on the change in social norms within the villages and how caste is in particular viewed. Because we had the contrasting two villages. One village that Amrita talked about in Madhubani district, where there's high migration. And when you ask and discuss with young people, they say, oh, no, caste, we don't have so much problem. It's less important because in towns, in urban areas, the caste relationship is lighter than in villages. So those population who have been migrants or in urban area, when there are high proportion of migrants, then the caste relationship within the village has eased a bit. And on the other hand, there is another village in South Bihar where migration is very low. Then the caste relationship is different.
Thank you. I think I would ask each of our speakers to think about. Can we come back, have a second round, because we don't want to put in too many questions. So each of our speakers has about 3 minutes to respond to the comments that were made now, as well as the specific comments that were made earlier, if you want to come back to them. And then we'll see if we have time for another one. Is that all right? So Tanweer, you want to go first? Pick and choose. You don't have to respond to every question, every comment.
Initially, Dr. Ghosh asked a question about migrant political behavior, both at home as well as in the workplace, within the host society. And my paper actually, because of positive time, I focus more on the home dimension, politics at home, and lesser at the workplace. I would say that in one reference when I was mentioning that none of these people who were workers whom I interviewed were members of the union. For a variety of reasons, we need not go into it. But much of the workforce is informal, and therefore if they were not members of the union is not so surprising as well. But as we see that workers and the migrants are primarily to two kinds of exploitative relationships in the work in the host society. One is the landlord-tenant kind of exploitative situation, and the other one is the employee and the employer. And in both the situations, the tendency there usually is to evade formal politics. And so, for example, the workers would frequently, these set of informal migrant workers would frequently change employers. They would frequently move from one industrial unit to another. Many times they would even leave their provident fund behind. And when I asked the question, they said that their long labor code battle, we ended up spending much more than what. So eventually, even if we get what we had left it there, but there were a lot of investments, and none of them were interested in that. And they would frequently. So exit is the strategy rather than engagement with politics in such situations. On the other hand, since the workplace is inert, politically inert, therefore the home becomes sort of an ideal for fulfilling the citizenship promises. That is what I was speaking the paper at. So this is the difference between the politics at home and politics outside, or what we call it non-home work. There was a question about despair and home, despair and hope. Yeah, it's not just despair which sends migrants out, even out of ambition, aspiration, etc. too, and therefore prosperous sections also migrate. And there's a good section of the white-collar workers from Bihar who migrated to cities like Delhi, and they are now in many of the middle-class societies. So, well, it's what I was trying to argue is that amongst the migrants also, if we're trying to understand their politics and their experiences, we need to also see into what kinds of migrants we're talking about. And therefore, these three kinds of respondents which I was referring to had different caste, social location, as well as years of experience of migration. And this would vary therefore. And since Kailash Sharma, the one who was upwardly mobile, has a completely different, longer year of migration experience, and also intergenerational mobility, they have more experience. And therefore, the idea of politics is completely different. He is not so much into agony, his experience there is not such agonizing as it is for the others. Yeah.
Thanks, Tanweer. Ratnakar, would you like to?
I'm not sure I remember all the comments and questions. Now, it's difficult to be sure if I'm responding. There's maybe one thing which I omitted to mention, that from my experience and also from literature and from the various surveys done, a good question to ask would be, who are the people who don't migrate in the countryside? And there again, it seems that the Musahars were probably, right at the bottom of the society. It's not very common for them to migrate outside, beyond a certain And they, of course, migration is in a sense enforced on them because they get chased out by various groups. So that could be, because the world of migration is such a shifty and fluid kind of universe. So one has to look for some definite anchors, occasionally. This is one of them, an indicator. Second thing, I think I should clarify the situation about use of these categories, caste, class, and literacy. So this is a kind of a hyphenated continuum, as I earlier tried to say. And I want to defend it further. Because what happens is, what emerges by using these categories is that you arrive at a clearer grasp of privilege and empowerment. Yeah. So yes, at the other end, you have something completely obscure because you mix caste, class, and literacy. It's like you have everything. But then once you distill this entire thing and go to the other extreme, what you do arrive at is a very good working definition, empirically useful for locating exactly where Very quickly, someone asked me about the terminology. Now the plan is to prepare the glossary for a number of Indian languages for the word migration and also migrant, and also for the other side, maybe the posts.
So in the case study, in the Brahmin case study, it was the father, it was a 60-year-old man who had taken over cultivation, and he was a very eager farmer who enjoyed doing it. And this was clearly an exception to the norm. In the Muslim household, it was the women who stayed behind, who worked in the family farm, and the men came back at the time of harvesting. But this is about the case study. In general, there are all kinds of processes going on. So you, on the one hand, you have a leasing out of land. Normally, upper caste households tend to lease out their land to intermediate and lower caste households which are already engaged in cultivation. At the same time, you have feminization of agriculture. And Janine's, when she's worked on that, you see women taking over agricultural activities when men have withdrawn. And along with that, we see a process where there is a general overall withdrawal from agriculture, and that's been really, really steep. So agricultural income, the income from agriculture in the period of 1999 to 2011, when the survey was done, it declined drastically. Like even now, Bihar is supposed to be 90% rural, and our income survey shows that less than a quarter of income comes from agriculture. So that's a bit of what's going on. About your question on circulation, so circulation is very classed. Like if you look at it, who you are in the village will ends up defining how far you'll go, what you'll do, and whether you'll come back or not, right? So, but for the majority of the population that goes, they know they're going to come back. There is no way that they will be able to sustain an urban foothold. So, for instance, in our surveys, we have a panel of about 900 households, and between 1999 and 2011, only 36 households had permanently migrated. By permanent migration, one means that they had left the village for all practical purposes, and left the village home, left village land, and for all practical purposes. Now, this is like a permanent migration rate of less than 12%. So circularity in that sense is very, very real for the majority of migrants.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all three of these presentations. Please join me a hand in giving them an applause. I would like to abuse my privilege as a chair at the very end, where I put a shameless plug for my own project. Two of our research assistants are here, that's Sadeep and Atul. A lot of our work has resonated with the findings from these projects. We've put up a photo exhibition downstairs. Please do take the time to have a look at them. With that shameless plug, I hand it back to the organizers.
Thank you everyone for making this session a success. And now lunch will be served in Lumbini Hall, so you can move down to the basement. And next technical session starts at 3. You can go in any of the rooms. There will be 3 parallel sessions in each of the rooms. Cordelia,